Okay, hello, this is Mr. Collier, and today we're doing a chi-square test for independence. And we're testing here to see if gender is independent of music choice or favorite music. Okay, and I'm going to highlight the data in this table and leave out the totals. The totals we won't be typing to our calculator, just the stuff in red right here. Okay, your calculator does the totals in the background stuff. So when you do this test, first thing you want to do is write down the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is always the same, that the two things are independent. So we start by assuming that the two things are independent. So gender and music choice are independent. And the alternative hypothesis is just gender and music choice are not independent. Another way to say that might be dependent, but this is usually the wording. So it's either this case or this case. And now it's just a matter of typing it into our calculator. So we can go to apps inference, and first make sure it's on chi-squared, and make sure you got two-way test, not goodness of fit. So the chi-squared test for independence is called two-way test on the calculator. Then go to num. This is where we can type in the data, not the totals. Do not include the totals. And then you simply click calc. And if you highlight over here, it even tells you what these things are. That's the chi-squared value, that's the p-value, and this is the degrees of freedom. So they ask you for the degrees of freedom. It's simply 3. Okay, also the degrees of freedom is the number of rows minus 1 times the number of columns minus 1. You do not need to do this in the question unless they ask you to, but anyway, it's just, as you can see, this is 2 and 4. So it's 2 minus 1 times 4 minus 1, which is 3, but your calculator spits it out for you, so you may not need to use this formula. Now we go to the conclusion, and luckily, let me go back to click OK and go back to calc. Actually, it doesn't tell you the conclusion. But you can now write down these chi-squared value and the p-value and use that for your conclusion. Chi-squared is 1.62 and the p-value is 0.654. And now it's useful to remember this little rhyme. Let's see if we have enough room. Yeah, let me try to squeeze it in there. When chi is high and p is low, reject HO. So it's a rhyme. When chi is high or p is low, reject HO. And the p-value is high because it's greater than the significance level. The significance level is either going to be 1%, 5%, or 10% on IB exams. In this case, it's 0.01. And this p-value is much bigger than that. So the p-value is high rather than low. And the chi-squared value that we calculated, sometimes we call it chi-squared calc, is less than the critical value. Which is 11.345. So when chi is high and p is low, reject HO. We do not have that in this case. We have chi is low and p is high, so we have the opposite. So we do not reject the null hypothesis. Or more specifically, we do not have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? That means we're basically assuming that they are not independent. So gender and music choice are not independent. Or sorry, they are independent because we're not rejecting the null hypothesis. So the conclusion of the test is We do not reject the null hypothesis, so there's not enough evidence to say that it's not the case that gender and music choice are independent. So we can say gender and music choice are independent. Independent.